Hey, it's Rich, the Louisiana Hobby Guy. Today's topic is creating a material library in Lightburn. Are you tired of setting up a project, getting the speed and the power down right, getting a perfect cut on your piece of plywood, and then writing it all down, and then dropping in a piece of pine, and all of a sudden those settings don't work, and you have to start all over again from scratch? Now you kind of figured out, well, you know what, I got to keep a notebook on all this stuff. So you start writing it down. You have little sticky notes here and sticky notes there and a notebook over there. Well, all of that's unnecessary. I'm going to show you today how to create a material library in Lightburn where all you need to do is a couple of clicks of the mouse and you're dead on, ready to start burning. You don't have to fool with testing or anything else. And before we get started, I'd appreciate a like or a subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. It just takes a second. So up on my screen, I've got my work plane. And on the work plane, I have an example piece of text. And what I'm going to do is assign that to a layer. So down on the bottom left, see where it says 01? I'm going to assign that to the 01 layer. And that's the layer we're going to be working with today, just so that I can show you this example. Lightburn has a feature called Library. You can store all of this information. And if you don't see it down here on the bottom right, then all you need to do is come up to Window, up at the very top, the window, and scroll all the way down until you see Library. Make sure this box right here is checked, and you're good to go. The library will show up down there. So let's come down here to the Library tab, and you'll see that this is my library of the things that I do most. And most recently, I've been doing Dollar General cutting boards. So if I double click on that, you'll see no thickness. That's the reason why there's no thickness, is because I don't cut these cutting boards. The only thing I do is etch or engrave. If I double click on that, you'll see I have 3 engraving methods for these cutting boards: dark, light, and medium burn. If I were to click on this, and let's say I was going to engrave this on one of these cutting boards, and I wanted a medium engraving, I'd click down here, medium engrave in my library, and I'd come over here and I'd click on Assign to Layer. Now I want you to watch right up here what happens when I click Assign to Layer. And here we go. Boom. And it assigned those properties to this layer. So now if I double click this and open it up, you'll see the speed is 2000, the power is 70, and I have 1 pass. All of this information is saved right here. So I don't have to pull out my notebook. I don't have to look for the Dollar General sticky note. I don't have to do any of that. And let me show you how to create this from new. Now I have several libraries. Now you see right here, this one is the ortur 20 watt. But I have several machines. So if I come down here to load and click on that, you'll see I have a separate folder on my desktop called Lightburn Art. And in that Lightburn Art, I have all of my artwork, which I'll show you in another video. And I have all of my lasers down here. Right now I have this one loaded. But if I wanted to, let's say the K40, I just double click that, and now you'll see the K40 is loaded. So the great thing about this is that most people that get into this, they wind up with 2 or 3 lasers. So you could have 2 or 3 different libraries with 2 or 3 different sets of speed and power based on the laser that you're using. But for this tutorial, what we're going to do is create a new one. You never hit this new button down here on the bottom right unless you're creating a new library, because it will make this library go blank and there'll be nothing there. So now we're starting from scratch, and this is probably what your screen looks like if you're here watching this video. So ignoring everything that's up on top here, and I guess I could just go ahead and get rid of it all to make this less confusing. We have our example, and over here on Cuts and Layers tab, you'll see if I double click this that we have this setting at 2000 and max power 70. Okay, now that's in a fill. So So what we want to do, let's say we'll change this to a line to start. Now let's set this up for a light engraving. So I'm going to go 3000, 70%. And if you have air assist, you turn this on. The mode is a line. Number of passes is 1. That's a light engraving for me. So I'm going to say OK. Now this is all set. We're starting from scratch, okay? The next thing we do is come down here to our empty library. We're going to create a new library from this layer. So we click on this button, and we're going to call this the material name. So let's say we're doing the cutting board, for example. And you want to be very descriptive here. You want to have a different material name for every material that you're using. Cutting board, plywood, cardboard, acrylic, and so on. The thickness, we're not going to be cutting the cutting board ever. So we're going to leave no thickness on there. If we had a cut, for example, like let's say we were doing cardboard, then we would have a thickness. We'd put the thickness in. But for this one, we're going to put none. Now the description here, and what we just decided a minute ago, was that we're going to do a light line engrave, and that's the description. So that's all we need here. This is the very top category, the material name. This is the next category, the thickness, which is none, and this is the description, and we say OK. Now we got it. So now we have the light, the cutting board settings, no thickness, light engrave. All we have to do now is duplicate that, double click it, and now let's say we want a medium engrave. Well, what I'm going to do is slow down my speed from 3000 to 1500, and I'm going to say OK. Now I can come down here, change the description to take out the copy part and take out the light and put in medium. Medium line engrave, and say OK. So now we have two. Light line engrave, medium line engrave, and they're different. If you look at the first one and do edit cut, you'll see 3070. OK. If we look at the second one, 1570, it's saving our settings. Now we can also create another new one. We're going to leave everything the same except the description, and we're going to call this dark line engrave, and say OK. So now we have dark. We'll open that up. We'll change this to, again, 1500, but I'm going to change the power to 85% and say OK. You see how easy this is? It seems confusing because most people don't understand the hierarchy that in this. Right now we still only have one library, the cutting board. Underneath that we have 3 types of line engravings. Now the next thing we wanted to do, let's say we wanted to add a fill. Well, let's double click on this and let's do fill, and we'll do the speed at 1500, and the max power I'm going to set for 50 and say OK. What we'll do here is create a new layer from this one in cutting board, no thickness, and then we're going to do backspace this out and put fill engrave and say OK. Now we have fill. So under cutting board we have fill engrave and line engrave. Now from fill we're going to create another layer in cutting board, and we're going to call this fill engrave dark and say OK. And I only have 2 types of fill engraves, light and dark. So I'm going to double click this, and for the darker engrave I'm going to do 1500, and I'm going to change this to 75 and say OK. Now that's basically the concept. That's how easy it is to do. So in the future, let's say I bring in a picture right here. I select it so that it's selected up here. Okay, you'll see that this is lit up. That's selected, and I assign something to it. And it doesn't matter. This is where I'll be starting off when I open the program. So let's say I wanted to do a line on a cutting board. I go to cutting board, no thickness, and what do I want the lines to be? Do I want dark line, light line, medium line? I just pick this, light it up, come over here to assign to layer, and watch up here when I click the button. Ready? Here it goes. There we go. It's just that easy. So let's close this up. Let's come up here and let's say we're gonna cut this out of some cardboard. Okay? So we're gonna change the speed to 1500, max power 90, line mode, and that's a cut. All right? So we're gonna create new, back down here in our library, create new from layer. Now the difference this time is we're going to change the name of the material, and we're going to call this cardboard, and the thickness we're going to change to 4 millimeters, and the description we're going to put cut and say OK. Now look at that, all of a sudden we have cardboard and we have cutting board. So now if we come to cardboard, we have the 4 millimeter cardboard, and you may have a couple different types. You just add another one, and the cut. And all we have to do is assign it to the layer. Now you've got a whole list of these things, I'm sure, already written down on your sticky notes, notebooks, and so on. So all you have to do is just transfer these in. So now let's say I wanted to etch this instead. Okay, I'm going to come and click duplicate. Leave cardboard there. I'm going to put no thickness this time. No thickness because we're going to engrave. And description is going to be engrave. And I'm going to say OK. So now I have cardboard. The next level in the hierarchy is no thickness for engraving. So you don't really need to understand all this. You just click cardboard, engrave, or cut. Which one do you want to do? And you assign that to the layer. And it's just that simple. And just for fun, let's do one more so we can do this 3 times in a row. And you might want to have your software open, and you can probably just listen while I do this. So I'm going to do create new from layer. I'm going to call this layer, and remember, you always have to have something here to start that's highlighted in order to create a new one. We're going to call this one plywood, and we're going to put the thickness at 3 millimeters, and we're going to call this one, we can leave this one at engrave light. We'll do engrave light and say OK. Now we have plywood category, 3 millimeter plywood, engrave light. We'll double click it, come in here, get our notes out, and set it up 2040, and that's a line engrave. Say OK. And actually what I can do now is edit the description because line. So there. So now we have edit light line, 3 millimeter plywood, edit light line. Now we're going to duplicate this again, and we're going to call this light and say OK, and edit the description again, engrave light photo. You want to make sure you get all these descriptions very detailed so you know what they are. So now we're going to do engrave light photo, and I'm going to change it to, this is based on what I've done before, is going to be 1550, and say OK. So now my 3 millimeter plywood, I have engrave light line engravings, engrave light photo. I'm going to duplicate this again. I'm going to change this to, I'm going to take out the copy part here, and I'm going to change this to dark, engrave dark photo, and we're going to stay at the 3 millimeters here so that it comes underneath this category, and say OK. Double click that. I'm going to change my power to 80 for a dark engraving on a photo, and now I have 3 different plywood engravings here. Now coming back to plywood, if I highlight plywood, I want to create a new layer in plywood. So we're going to leave the material name there, plywood. The thickness is going to be 3 millimeters, and we're going to put cut and say OK. Then I'm going to double click on cut. Now to cut 3 millimeter plywood, I need to be at 500 speed. This I already know. I need to be at 85% power, and I need to have 6 passes. 500 speed, 85 power, 6 passes. Okay. So now let's say that I have a piece of plywood on my workspace, and this example is not, that's not going to cut it out because I want to cut it. All right. All I have to do is come down here to my library, go to plywood, 3 millimeter, cut, assign to layer, and there it is. It's ready to go. No more searching for your sticky notes. No more flipping through your notepad. Everything is here. Now, what we do next, once we've put a couple in here, and you should do this as you go, do save as. Now, in this one, on my desktop, have a folder called Desktop Lightburn Art. This is where I keep all of my artwork, like I said earlier, and this is where I keep all of my cut libraries. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure you give this a descriptive name. So you can put your laser in there. I'm just going to put example for right now and say save. And it's saved forever. No matter what happens, if you hit new by mistake and oh, it's gone, you know, all you have to do is click load, come up here to your desktop, your Lightburn art, and example, and everything's right back where it is. It's just that easy. In no time, in 5 minutes flat, we were able to start populating this. Every time you do something new, and let me show you something real quick. I'm going to load my ortur 20, and in here I've got acrylic, black, colored acrylic. I've got balsa wood. I've got cardstock, ceramic tiles, corrugated cardboard, Dollar Tree cutting board, felt, leather, MDF, blah blah blah, all the way down. And whatever I'm doing, let's say I'm doing this on slate tiles. There's not going to be any thickness because I'm never going to cut it. The only thing I'll ever do is engrave it. So I click engrave, assign to layer, and I'm ready to run the job. It doesn't get any easier than this, folks. So if you enjoyed what you saw here, please give it a like and subscribe. Tell me what you think. Leave me a comment down below. Thanks for watching.